Let's look at the next relationship of question and answer as we continue to walk through these subordinate relationships. Question and answer is pretty straightforward. It's the statement of a question and the answer to that question. So this is one of the most recognizable of the relationships. The key word you're going to look for is really not a word at all, but really is a question mark. You're going to be looking for that question mark as the key indicator, as the key word, even though it's not a word, to point you toward the relationship of question and answer. One thing you do want to keep in mind is that sometimes the answer to questions in Scripture will be implied because they're using a question as a rhetorical device. And so sometimes the answer is implied. And so there's times when a question is offered and then an answer or a statement is given in answer to that question. But there's sometimes where a question is asked by the writer and then the answer is simply implied. So you have to be aware of that dynamic. Also, you can note that rhetorical questions can be, when you're arcing them out, can be rephrased into statements and arced that way instead, because it's being used as a rhetorical question. Actually, a statement is being made, not so much looking for an answer, but the answer is obvious or assumed in the question. So you can just rephrase that into a statement and arc it that way. Our shorthand for question and answer is simply going to be Q and A. We're going to use that in our arcing. And you'll see that with our arcs here, we'll just write, because it's a subordinate relationship, Q and A under the two arcs. And we will arc that under one arc there. Let me give you an example of question and answer. Let me give you an example of question and answer from Galatians chapter 3, verse 21, in the first part of verse 21. Is the law then contrary to the promises of God? Certainly not, Paul says. Is the law then contrary to the promises of God? So you can see that we really have two propositions here. We have a question keyed off by the question mark, and then a strong answer, certainly not, exclamation point, Paul really means it. Is the law contrary to the promises of God? Certainly not. So let's write these out as two propositions, and we can see this even more clearly. Is the law then contrary to the promises of God? Question mark. Answer, certainly not, exclamation point. We're going to label this 21A and B. Draw our line and an arc over each proposition. And because we've identified already that this is a question and an answer, we're going to label this Q and A. That this is a question that is immediately answered. So this is just an example of one of the most straightforward relationships, question and answer.